Alright guys, welcome back to the 67 F100 with the 5.7 HEMI that will be turboed and the 5-speed and the Dana 60s, you know, all the good stuff you want in life. And in the last video I made engine mounts and trans mounts, and we actually swapped the trans to an NV4500. So that's all done, but like I was saying, I need to basically get the steering column set so I can put steering gear in it and kind of button up the front frame rails. So, along with that, I need to make this truck more comfortable. That was my big gripe with this truck. I loved this truck, like, I love the way it looks, but I just didn't fit. Like, I'm only 6 foot tall, but I don't know, I just didn't feel comfortable in there. Steering wheel's kind of at a weird position. Pedals are super tall, so I don't really want to lose the original column, so I'm going to try to modify it and basically move it to where it's more comfortable. But the pedals, they're all going away. I'm swapping pedals over, so that's what we're going to do in this video. Alright, so this is my problem here, is the steering wheel is really close to me, and kind of, it's not terrible, but like my leg gets into it. Like to get the clutch, like if I move this over here, you know, to get my foot on the clutch, my leg is basically like on, well, no, clutch stuck now, basically hitting the steering wheel, which that's not very comfortable, and the brake pedal is at a weird spot. And the throttle on these things, if I pull it up, because it's obviously not hooked to anything right now, so the stock throttle was at like this weird angle like this, you know, from the side. It's just kind of weird, and it wasn't comfortable. So I want to keep this wheel. What I think I'm going to do is try to slide it forward a little bit, and I'm not sure about the angle. I'm just going to kind of play with it just to try to make it a little bit more comfortable, get it away from me a little bit, because right now it's just too close to me. But with that, I'm going to ditch all the pedals, and for that I have another set of pedals. Alright, so this is the pedal assembly that I got, and I could have gone like with a crazy aftermarket, like race style pedal setup or something, but I don't know, I just don't need that, and I kind of like doing stuff, you know, repurposing other stuff and doing things kind of the cheap way. And this is actually a pedal assembly. There's a gas pedal and everything. This is a pedal assembly out of a 98 to 02 Trans Am or Camaro. Now, that's kind of a random thing, right? Like, why did I pick that? Well, it's actually the same pedal assembly I put in the 51 when I built the 51. How did I pick it for the 51? It was on the shelf. I didn't even remember what it was from. I found it and I'm like, hey, this will work perfectly. It has 3 pedals, everything is great. And then I realized it's actually left over from when I bought the T56 from my wife's Trans Am. And it fits so well in the 51. Like, the mounting's really simple, the pedal spacing is perfect. It's like the 51 is so comfortable to drive for me. So I jumped on eBay, and I think this thing cost me like 80 bucks. So it's already got the clutch pedal, it's even got some of the sensors. The nice thing is like the brake switch, the clutch switch and everything. I just go to Rock Auto and just buy factory Trans Am stuff. And then it also has, the nice thing is that it has the gas pedal attached too. So the spacing, everything is kind of stock, and it's super comfortable. And it's just got a couple mounts here for the brakes, and then it has one up top here. So that's what I'm going to stick in here, and I've already figured out that what I did on the 51, which same trans setup, I can use the F-body master for the clutch, and then use a stock Dodge slave cylinder, and they go right together. Everything works great. Brakes, I put Hydroboost on the 51, and I've also picked up a Hydroboost unit for this thing. It takes some welding up here to make an adapter bracket. No big deal, works great. And then cable throttle body, very simple. So what I got to do now is get that pedal box out of there, loosen up that column so I can kind of move it around and see where it's comfortable, and then we can start making some brackets and welding some stuff up. Okay, so I've got all the carpet out, I got the seat back in so I can still kind of mock up what's comfortable. And so the column's just kind of shoved in there right now. That F-body pedal assembly is kind of wrapped around there. Kind of, sort of where it'll go, but the big thing is this column here has these 2 tabs, and they actually mount out here, like in space. They don't mount to the dash. And here's the the old pedal bracket. So these two mount to the dash, these two wide ones. And you can see from here, so that mounts to the bottom of the dash. And this piece here comes up and wraps around and actually mounts the column. Well, that's gone now. And there's not a real good way to, I mean, I could weld onto the dash, but I think what I'm gonna do is actually trim this off of here. Because then right here is the F-body pedal assembly. I can weld that on there and basically kind of recreate this, but using the pedals that I want. And then the other thing I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna drill this out. It's spot welded to the column, so I'm gonna drill this bracket out and free it up, and then I can slip it up and down the column wherever I want and kind of set my column, and it'll kind of, you know, it'll all pretty much look factory because the trim piece will go on like it should. This will all mount up, this will look right. So at first glance, it'll look original, but I can actually put the column where I want. Okay, so this is what I came up with here. Let me get a light. So those are the F-body pedals. And then actually, the whole, you can see it up there, I used the whole bracket from the truck. It actually fits and it ties in really nice. And then the other thing I did was right here, you can see I drilled out the spot welds, and I basically slid the entire column 2 inches forward. And then I also shimmed it up a little bit here with some cardboard. So I'll probably put a metal shim in there when I do it. But this truck actually fits me pretty well now. So another thing I did was I took the brake pedal and I put the vice grip on to keep it from lifting all the way, because I'm going to run Hydroboost, so I don't need a ton of travel. So that makes this super comfortable, like, and yeah, it's not hooked up to anything. That's what this bungee cord's for. Clutch is a little high, but I don't know, when you go for a clutch, you kind of come back on it anyway. Okay, so this is what I've got. Ignore the dirty workbench. I am definitely the messiest builder ever. I'd rather build than clean. But, so this is F-body, this is Ford. And you can see it butts right up against it. I thought I had to clearance it, turned out I didn't. So I've got it tacked here, and I've got a little plate booger welded in here just to hold it. But what I'm gonna do is basically add a plate here, clean this up, probably add a plate here, and just weld these two together, and then she will be very, very solid. And it's nice because it keeps all the stiffness and the column out. So it ties everything together here, but we get all this nice pedals over here. All right, I got her all welded up. I dropped a little plate in there and that made that solid. There's a little bracket here that I rotated and kind of burned that all together. So I mean, it is it's solid now. I mean, it's one piece. That's the whole big bracket twisting. So that'll work perfect. All right, so I got the pedals back in. They are, I mean, they're rock solid. They're not going anywhere. It's all braced up. Everything's in there. It's fully welded. Pulled the cluster out to make it a little easier. Column's out, and I'm not going to do the column because it's probably just going to be in the way. What I'm going to do is the brakes. So I'm going Hydroboost, and for those of you that don't know what Hydroboost is, that is this part right here. It has this little accumulator over here, and then these are power steering lines. So instead of using vacuum to give you power brakes, it uses the power steering lines, the power steering pressure. Why do I want this over like a normal vacuum boost? One, I like the pedal feel better. It's a little bit stiffer. It does give you a lot better braking. You get a lot more assist out of this compared to like a vacuum system. And also with the turbo and the vacuum system, you have to check valve it. And you can do it. I mean, you can definitely do vacuum brakes with a turbo and boost, but this, I will always have power brakes. I can go as big a tires as I want. This thing will just, you know, stop on a dime. And this is from, I think, a 2010 Ram. I don't know. I bought it off eBay. I was just looking for like the cheapest one, and this one looked to be in really good shape and was pretty cheap. Came off a wreck truck. So this is what attaches to the pedal. So we have to basically, this flange here has to go through the firewall. So I'm gonna have to drill a hole, and then on the inside I have to basically make a plate that will mate up to what's in there. So I've got to figure out on the firewall here where the pedal rod wants to come through off those F-body pedals. Drill a hole there, a little hole like a pilot, and then drill a hole big enough for this to sit through, make a plate to sandwich on the inside, weld it all together. It's confusing, but it sounds confusing, but it's pretty simple. So I'm going to go in, mark a pilot hole, and start mocking this thing up. Okay, so I made this plate. to bolt up to the Hydroboost. So this will actually go on the inside of the firewall on the other side, not where I'm at now, and will basically sandwich the firewall. This will get welded to the pedals in there to reinforce everything. So that mounts up here, and this is kind of gnarly looking. So this is the Hydroboost hole. This other one over here is the old hole for the old hydraulic cylinder for the last trans that was in here and the old pedals. So it looks nasty, but in the end, this plate totally blocks it off, so you'll never even see it. And then you might also notice that this plate only has 3 holes, and I didn't drill another hole down here because it overlaps with the steering column bracket, which comes over here. So I'm gonna basically put all this together. I'll mark that out and then trim it back, and I might have to do it beforehand because there's a little hole there. But I'll trim it back, and then I'll probably relocate the stud in, so I still have 4 studs, just to make it clear the steering column. Everything's real tight here, but I think it's gonna work. I'm just gonna mount up the Hydroboost now and see how it all fits. Okay, I got it mocked up in here, and as you can see, there's quite an overlap there with the steering. So I'm gonna trim that back, and I'm gonna trim this back a little bit. You can kind of see my mark there. And I'm basically just gonna try to make them live next to each other. But that's about where the brakes are gonna sit. And then on the inside, I'll put in that plate, which you can see is right there. So I had to clearance it around the steering gear there, or the steering column there. So that plate is gonna get welded to this bracket. So I'll weld it probably right up this side here. And then over here, it's hard to see, but I'm gonna put a piece of metal right here and weld them together. That way when I push on the brakes, it's not trying to separate the two, it's all one piece, and it's not just pushing on the firewall. It's actually reinforced into the dash structure and the steering column mount and the pedals. It's all one piece, and it's not just gonna flex the firewall and eventually crack the firewall, because I don't want that. So I'm gonna tack this up, cut a piece of steel for over here, tack that in, pull it out, weld it, and then we're gonna have to, when it's out, we can bolt it all together, and we can trim this push rod down to fit the brake pedal so the length is right, and we're making some progress. Chugging along pretty quick here. I'm happy with this. All right, brakes are mounted up. You see I got it all clearanced in there. That works. It's all mounted. It looks pretty good. And then in here, I got the push rod shortened up. You can kind of see it up in there. Not really, but so the pedal's hooked up now. I need a bushing in there, so it's a little sloppy. But that's done, the brakes are done, that plate's welded in. It is solid as hell. So the next thing I gotta do is get this steering column in, which I made this little spacer here. Just 2-inch quarter wall tube that I cut off and then ground. So that'll fit on there pretty nicely. I'll just have to weld it, and it should go right in here and space the column up that 1/4 inch just to get it a little bit higher, because that seemed to be more comfortable. So put that in, and then I'll tack weld this to the column and then pull it out, weld this to that, and fill in these tacks that I just did lightly. And then the steering column will be mounted, and then we can move on to linkage and box and all the fun stuff. But for the most part, the pedals are all finished up. Obviously, we'll have to put a cable on this, and this will have to drill a hole down here for the master, but the hard work's done. I mean, they're in, and they are solid. The brakes are solid too. I don't push on it. It shoots fluid everywhere. I've done it like 5 times, made a huge mess. But let me get that column mocked up and welded in. Okay, I got that bolted in. It's not tacked, but I think I've got it at a good spot here. I mean, sitting here, I'll put my arm on the door. That's good. Arm on the armrest. That's comfortable. Up top, you can even like put my hand down here. I think this is good. This is super comfortable. Pedals are good. Like clutch, like I got a ton of room to get off the pedal. So I don't know. I think I'm good. I think this is where I'm going to set the column, because I like it. It's forward about 2 inches, and then I took it up about 1/4. So I mean, that's a bunch more room than I had before. So there's a bunch more room here, which is good. Grow the beer belly a little bit if it happens. And yeah, that's good. Tack it in and then pull it back out, weld it, and then the steering's done. Then we can move down. But I'm super happy with this. I actually feel like I fit this truck now, which is really cool. So, yeah. Column's in. I got the little trim piece on, everything. Dude, it's solid. Like, it worked out really, really well. And at first glance, you won't even notice it's modified, which is kind of what I want. Like, I want this thing to be, I don't want it to just be an outrageous, you know, looking modified custom truck. I kind of just want it to look mostly stock till you start peeking at it. And then comes through there, looks pretty good. Gonna have to shorten this up, but I gotta get a steering wheel puller because this is gonna be too long. And I have a bearing that'll basically slip in the end of this. So wherever we shorten it to make the steering, which for the steering, we've got, so this is the old steering gear out of my 06 Ram because I put a new one in. This one wasn't terrible, which I think it'll be a lot better in this truck because that truck's a quad cab long bed, real heavy. Yeah, this Ford's a nice light little weight truck. Worst case, I'd buy a new one, but I don't really want to. And then I've got a track bar for basically the same truck, like an 06 Ram. Bushings on both ends, it'll bolt right in to the axle, and then we just got to make a mount over here for the frame side. The nice thing is it has this little kick out here to go around the front diff, and then bushings on both ends. So it's a nice upgrade from what would have came with this axle, because those track bars are junk. And then this giant bubble wrap thing is steering linkage for 2010 Ram, which supposedly, if the internet is correct, will drop right into this pitman arm, and I'll have to drill out the taper on the knuckles. So I got this little thing, which who knows if it'll work, a tapered reamer, and we'll have to drill out the knuckles on both sides to get this to bolt in. But this will be, it's a crossover instead of this inverted Y garbage steering that's awful on these trucks. So this is a lot better, and I have no idea what it looks like because this is exactly how Rock Auto shipped it to me, in a giant thing of bubble wrap, and I haven't opened it yet. But we need to try to get all that mounted up in here, and then we can make a cross member. But first thing would be open this up, take the wheels off, and see if it'll actually bolt on, or if I do need to ream it out. Okay, I'm a little scared because that was the easiest upgrade ever. It literally just bolted right on there. I didn't have to ream anything. I mean, it's got plenty, it's seated in there perfectly, so that's a little, it's a little sketchy. But, I mean, look at the size of that thing. I mean, if I grab the tie rod, it's like my whole hand, and then you go to this one, and it's like little dinky thing. So, this is the stock, like, I think this is axles out of a 95. So, stock 95 Ram, steering linkage, and then 2010, I think. So it's a hell of a lot beefier. And there's even, I didn't even catch this earlier, there's even a mount right here for a steering stabilizer. So all I have to do is build an axle mount for the steering stabilizer, and I'll have a steering stabilizer on there. So this is some beefy steering, and it bolted right on without having to do anything. That is absolutely awesome. I had to figure out where this gear is going to go. Somewhere, probably right where I put that brace. So that's going to be fun. Alright, I got the gear kind of just sitting in here. It's bolted up to the drag link. And when you're doing a drag link and a track bar, so this is the drag link, which is what turns it, and then that's the track bar, you want them to be the same angle and same length so you don't get any bump steer, which I've got them pretty close. The track bar is actually hanging down a little bit low on the frame side, so that'll come up. But I think that's going to work. And then up here, this is going to kind of sneak by here pretty tight, but I'm going to actually shift the gear over a little bit. I'm going to notch this so it can sit inside. And then for the 3 gear mounts, you don't really want to just bolt to a plate because this sees a lot of force, it's going to break. So what I'm going to do is take this tube here, and I'm going to cut 3 little, because there's 3 mounts, 3 little sections of tube to weld in here, and I'll poke them through the frame, and then they'll bolt in, or I'll weld them in and then you bolt through. That way it can't deflect or move or anything. And then on the inside, I'll end up putting a piece of 1/4-inch plate in there to brace the inside to kind of box it all in. But for now, I gotta cut that tube up, get it bolted on the gear, get it kind of mocked up, start cutting the frame up, and then I can weld it in. Alright, so this is what I came up for mounts, which those look pretty nice. And then I came up with this for a cross member. So I had to notch it out here for the steering gear is gonna go through here. And then on the inside, you can see the 3 kind of bosses sticking through, and then that cross member is going to go right across here. So I'm going to drop this cross member in, weld it in, and then I'll put a plate to tie it all together, and that should bring all my stiffness back in the front, and we'll have steering. And then I just got to throw a track bar mount up there. Once I get that ratchet strap out of there, it's kind of keeping the frame from twisting because I don't have a front cross member. But this one ought to beef it up. Got to weld that in, make a plate, and we'll have steering. This thing's coming along nicely. I'm very happy with how it's turned out so far. So I got the cross member welded in. I added that little brace over here that I was talking about because I cut the frame out there. I got a plate in here. The welds don't look the greatest, so it's kind of dirty, but it'll hold. So I got this cross member welded in, and then I added a plate up here on the back side there to tie up in because the input shaft kind of runs up here, so I had to scallop it, but it's all in there. It's solid. That plate's braced in, so yeah. I'm just going to put the steering gear in, and then I got to make a track bar, and then the front end of this thing is pretty much tidied up. Okay, I'm really happy with this because that track bar, look at it, drops right behind the drag link. Perfect. And those two angles between these two, that worked out perfect. Mounts in there, it's solid. So steering's done. I just got to do a shaft here, which I had to cut down that, move it up, but that'll snake right through there over the exhaust. It's going to work out perfect. This cross member braced everything up. It fits around here real nice. I mean, it's really, really happy with this. I mean, steering's all done, track bar's done, cross members in, the pedals are in. I mean, this was really productive because I got the pedals in, the brake master's in, the steering column shortened up in a good spot. The whole front steering's done, you know, minus the shaft. I mean, this thing is coming together really nice. I'm super, super happy with it. And now it's the fun part, because now I get to hang the turbo, and I think I'm going to put it up high, just like I did on the 51. Kind of hang it way up here somewhere. So yeah, that's going to be the next video, is we're going to basically build the hot side of the exhaust, I think, up to the turbo. And yeah, that's get the front clip back on. I mean, this thing is really coming together now. I mean, the suspension's done. So that's, I mean, shocks. I gotta do shocks. Can't forget that. But the fab work is pretty much done, other than rear shock mounts, because the front bolts right in. I mean, this thing's turning out awesome. I am super, super pumped with the way the steering. I knew this was going to be a pain, but it's all reinforced. It's super solid. I can't wait. Making a turbo kit next.